"The money is gone, Mom. We transferred the entire fortune Dad left you into Patrick's account," my daughter Sarah announced with a mocking sneer. "You should have been a better mother-in-law." I responded calmly. How interesting. Because the true fortune my husband Arthur had left was protected in an account where they would never think to look. And at that moment, the bank would be doing exactly what my husband had ordered months before he died. But to understand how I arrived at that moment, standing in my own living room, listening to my daughter confess to robbery with the tranquility of someone ordering a latte, I need to go back 2 months, to the day I buried Arthur, to the day my life, as I knew it, came to a complete stop. It was a Tuesday in March, when the cancer finally took the man who had been my partner for 43 years. The chapel was filled with white flowers, familiar faces, and words of comfort that sounded hollow in my ears. I was 71 years old, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. Arthur had been my rock, my confidant, my best friend. We had built a life together since we were 22, back when he was just a young clerk at an import firm, and I was working as a secretary at a local school. Sarah cried at the funeral. She cried with those dramatic, heaving sobs that drew the attention of everyone present. Patrick, her new husband, held her by the shoulders, offering her tissues, whispering words into her ear. I watched them from my seat in the front row, feeling something strange in my chest, something that wasn't just grief for Arthur's death. It was a discomfort, a sensation that something didn't fit. My daughter had visited her father only 3 times during his last 2 months of life, 3 times in 60 days, and every time she came, Patrick was with her, always attentive, always asking about paperwork, about accounts, about properties. After the burial, everyone returned to my house. The same house Arthur and I had bought when we got married, a modest middle-class home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. People ate the casseroles and sandwiches the neighbors had brought over, drank coffee, and shared stories about Arthur. I moved among them like a ghost, smiling when necessary, thanking them for their condolences, feeling like my heart had turned to stone. Sarah approached me at the end of the afternoon, when most of the guests had already left. "Mom, we need to talk about practical things," she told me, taking my hand with a softness that I now know was fake. "Dad left a lot of loose ends. Patrick and I want to help you organize everything. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." I nodded, grateful in that moment for her apparent concern. How naive I was. The following days were a blur of sadness and paperwork. Arthur's lawyer read the will. The house remained in my name. The main bank accounts, in my name. Some minor investments were divided between our 2 children, although our eldest son, Daniel, had passed away in a car accident 10 years ago, so his share went to his daughter, my granddaughter Lily. Sarah listened to everything with attention, taking notes, asking questions that at that moment seemed sensible to me, but that I now understand were calculated. "There is a joint account," the lawyer explained, reviewing his documents. "A savings account in the name of Mrs. Eleanor Vance and Miss Sarah Vance, established 2 years ago. Mr. Vance set it up this way, for reasons he considered prudent. It currently has a balance of $100,000. Sarah nodded, but said nothing. I barely paid attention. $100,000 seemed like a significant sum. Yes, but at that moment, the only thing that mattered to me was the void Arthur had left in my life. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know in the midst of my grief, was that this joint account was a trap, not for me, but to reveal the true intentions of those who approached with sweet words and empty hugs. Arthur had planned it all with the precision of a strategist. 3 months before he died, when the pain was constant and the hopes of recovery were null, he had sat me down on our back porch and told me something I didn't want to believe. "Eleanor, my love, I need you to listen to this very carefully," Arthur had begun, holding my hand with that tenderness he never lost. "Not even on his worst days, when I am no longer here, some people are going to show their true faces. I don't want you to think badly of anyone, but I need you to be prepared." I had protested, telling him that our family loved us, that our loved ones wouldn't change just because he was no longer there. But Arthur had shaken his head slowly. "Money changes people, or rather, it reveals who they always were. I have worked for 52 years, Eleanor, since I was 16 and had to leave school to help my mother. I have built something important, and I want you to be protected." Then he explained his plan. We would leave an accessible, visible account with a considerable amount, but not our entire fortune. That account would have Sarah as a co-signer. If she really loves us, if that Patrick is a good man, they will never touch that money without your consent. But if I am right, if there is greed in their hearts, they will show themselves as they are as soon as I close my eyes. I had wept that night, begging him not to think that way about our daughter. But Arthur had been firm. "It's not distrust, my love. It's caution. And if I'm wrong, if Sarah turns out to be the loving daughter we both believe she is, then this plan will never be activated, and I will have been a foolish, paranoid old man. But if I am right." He left the sentence unfinished, but his eyes said it all. The rest of our fortune, more than $2 million in real estate, investments, bonds, and international accounts, remained protected in legal structures Arthur had created with specialized attorneys. Irrevocable trusts, accounts with specific clauses, investments requiring multiple authorizations, everything in my name, everything under my absolute control, everything invisible to curious eyes that only looked in the obvious places. Weeks passed after the funeral. I tried to adapt to my new reality. I woke up every morning expecting to hear Arthur's voice calling me from the kitchen, asking if I wanted coffee. I brewed 2 cups out of habit, and then remembered, with a stabbing pain in my chest, that he was no longer there. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that now hurt like open wounds. Sarah came to visit me, but her visits had a strange pattern. She always arrived with Patrick. She always asked about papers, about documents, about bank accounts. "We just want to make sure you're organized, Mom," she would say with that smile I then interpreted as filial concern. Patrick would nod, adding comments about the importance of getting everything in order and being practical in these difficult times. One day, approximately 6 weeks after the funeral, Sarah arrived with a folder full of documents. "Mom," Patrick spoke with his lawyer, "we have a proposal that is going to benefit you a lot. Remember that joint account Dad opened 2 years ago? Well, as a co-signer, I have certain rights, but we want to do things right. We want you to sign here, officially authorizing that both of us can manage that account. It's just a legal formality, to protect you." I, in my naivety, in my grief, in my blind motherly trust, signed. I signed without reading the fine print. I signed without consulting an independent lawyer. I signed because I believed my daughter sought my well-being. 2 weeks after signing those papers, Sarah arrived at my house unannounced. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garden pruning the roses Arthur had planted years ago. I heard her car pull into the driveway and felt a small spark of joy. Maybe she was coming to spend time with me. Maybe we could have tea together like we used to, before she was older and our relationship wasn't tainted by Patrick's presence. But when I opened the door, the expression on her face told me this wasn't a social visit. Patrick was with her, as always. They entered without waiting for an invitation, walked straight to the living room, and sat on the sofa as if they owned the place. Sarah opened her purse and took out her cell phone. "Mom, sit down. We have something important to tell you." I sat in the armchair, the one that had been Arthur's favorite. I could still feel his presence there. I could imagine his hand on the armrest, the way he crossed his legs while reading the newspaper. "What's wrong?" I asked calmly, although something inside me was already alerting me that this would not be a pleasant conversation. Sarah looked at Patrick, who nodded as if giving her permission to continue. She took a deep breath, but in her eyes, I didn't see nervousness. I saw determination. I saw something cold and calculated that I had never seen in my own daughter before. "The money is gone. Mom, we transferred the entire fortune Dad left you into Patrick's account." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the beating of my own heart that seemed to have stopped for an instant. I looked at her without comprehending, hoping it was a bad joke, hoping she would smile and say it was just a strange way of testing my sense of humor. But she didn't smile warmly. She smiled mockingly. "You should have been a better mother-in-law," Sarah continued, and every word was like glass breaking on the floor. "Patrick needed capital for his new business. We need to start our life together on solid ground. And you? Well, you already lived your life alongside Dad. You already had your chance. Patrick leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, looking at me with that smug expression that had always disturbed me. Nothing personal, Eleanor. The papers you signed 2 weeks ago gave us full legal authorization over that account. My lawyer verified everything. $100,000 that are now safe in my business account. Consider it an investment in your daughter's future. I watched them both as if seeing them for the first time, as if two strangers had entered my house and were speaking to me in a language I couldn't completely understand. My daughter. The girl I had carried in my womb for 9 months, the baby I had nursed through endless nights. The girl I had taught to tie her shoes, to ride a bike, to defend herself from the world. That same person was now sitting in front of me, confessing to a robbery like someone confessing to buying a new dress. How interesting? It was the only thing that came out of my mouth. My voice sounded strangely calm, almost indifferent, and I saw Sarah's smile waver slightly. She expected screaming, tears, desperation. She expected to see me destroyed, pleading, begging them to reconsider their decision. But something inside me had activated. Arthur's voice resonated in my mind like an echo from the past. When they show themselves as they are, don't fight. Just watch. You will have time to act. Sarah exchanged a confused look with Patrick. Is that all you're going to say? How interesting. Her tone rose slightly, as if my lack of dramatic reaction had disappointed her. Mom, do you understand what we are telling you? The money is gone. We transferred it 3 days ago. It is legal. It is final. I understand perfectly. I responded with the same calm that surprised even me. You took the money from that account, $100,000. I understand it very well. Patrick relaxed visibly, interpreting my tranquility as defeat or resignation. I'm glad you're taking it with maturity, Eleanor. Many mothers would make an unnecessary scene. This shows you are a rational woman. He stood up, smoothing his expensive shirt, the shirt he had probably bought anticipating the money they had just stolen. Now, there is another topic we want to discuss. This house. What about this house? I asked, feeling every muscle in my body tense up. Sarah also stood up, walking around the living room as if appraising the property. She touched the frame of a family photograph, ran her finger along the back of the sofa, looked around with critical eyes. It's too big for you alone, Mom. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, this huge garden that requires constant maintenance. At your age, you should be in something smaller, more manageable. Patrick and I have been thinking we could help you sell it. Help me sell it, I repeated the words slowly, letting their full meaning settle in my mind. Exactly. We can get a good price for it. This neighborhood has appreciated a lot. With that, you could rent a small apartment, something comfortable and simple. And the rest of the money? Well, Patrick has excellent contacts for investments. We could make that capital work for you. The way she said it, the way her eyes shone with greedy anticipation, revealed exactly what kind of investments she had in mind. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of my 71 years in every joint, but also feeling a mental clarity I hadn't experienced since Arthur's death. I am not going to sell this house. This house is mine. Arthur and I bought it together, paid for it together, raised our family here. Our son Daniel learned to walk in this living room. You took your first steps by that window. We celebrated every Christmas, every birthday, every important moment of our lives here. It is not for sale. Sarah's smile disappeared completely. Mom, be reasonable. You can't maintain this house with your Social Security check. The utility bills, the maintenance, the property taxes. Without Dad's savings, you won't be able to sustain it. I will find a way, I responded firmly. Patrick took a step toward me, and there was something threatening in his posture even though he didn't raise his voice. Eleanor, I think you aren't understanding your current situation. You no longer have access to those $100,000. Your pension is modest. Sarah is trying to help you be practical before you end up in a desperate financial situation. Something broke inside me at that moment. It wasn't my heart, because that had already been broken since Arthur died. It was the illusion that my daughter loved me unconditionally, the illusion that family was a sacred bond that money couldn't corrupt, the illusion that I had raised a person with values and empathy. All of that shattered as I looked at those two beings who had entered my home not as loving visitors, but as vultures assessing prey. "I need you to leave," I said in a low but firm voice. "Now." Sarah blinked, surprised. "What?" "Mom, we're trying to help you." I said, "Leave. Get out of my house. Now." I walked to the door and opened it wide. "Get out." Patrick took Sarah by the arm, but before leaving, he turned to me with an expression that pretended to be pity but only showed contempt. "This is exactly what we feared. You are acting irrationally, Eleanor. When you calm down and realize your financial reality, you'll know where to find us." He walked past me without looking at me, heading to the car. Sarah stopped at the threshold. For a moment, just a brief moment, I thought I saw a glimpse of the daughter I used to know, a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a hesitation in her expression. But then her gaze hardened. "You're going to regret this, Mom. You're going to end up alone, without money, without anyone to help you. And when that happens, don't come looking for me. Don't worry." I responded with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "I won't." I watched her walk away, get into the car next to Patrick, and watch them disappear down the street. Only when the sound of the engine faded completely did I close the door. I leaned against it, feeling my legs trembling, my whole body beginning to process what had just happened. I walked toward Arthur's study like a sleepwalker, that sacred space where he spent hours reading, planning, dreaming of our future. His desk remained exactly as he had left it. His glasses rested on a book about financial strategies. His pens were organized in the holder I had given him for our 30th anniversary. The family photographs covered the walls, capturing moments of happiness that now seemed to belong to another life. I picked up one of those photographs. It was from our 25th anniversary. We were in a modest restaurant, toasting with cheap wine, smiling with that genuine happiness that only true love gives. Arthur looked at me in that photo with a devotion that never diminished, not even after 4 decades together. "You were right, my love," I whispered to his image. "You were absolutely right." I opened the bottom left drawer of his desk, the one he always kept locked. The key was where Arthur had told me it would be, inside an envelope marked with my name. Inside the drawer was a brown leather binder, thick and heavy. I took it out with trembling hands and placed it on the desk. On the cover, in Arthur's precise and elegant handwriting, was written, "For Eleanor. When the time comes, you will know what to do." I opened the binder slowly, like someone opening a treasure chest, and, in a way, that was exactly what it was. The first page was a handwritten letter by Arthur, dated 3 weeks before his death. My eyes filled with tears as I began to read his words. "My beloved Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means my worst fears have been confirmed. It means someone showed their true face after my departure. I know it hurts, my love. I know right now you feel the world has become dark and cruel. But I need you to understand something fundamental. This is not your fault. You didn't fail as a mother. You didn't fail as a person. You simply loved generously those who didn't know how to value it." I had to stop, wiping the tears falling on the paper. Arthur's voice resonated in every word. I could hear him speaking to me with that tenderness he always had, even when telling me difficult truths. "In this binder, you will find everything you need to know about our true financial situation. The $100,000 I left in that joint account were a test, my love. A painful but necessary test. If someone took that money without your consent, if someone took it from you with deceit or manipulation, then you have confirmed that person never loved you for who you are, but for what you could give them." I turned to the next page and found a detailed list. My eyes widened as I read, as I understood the magnitude of what Arthur had prepared. There were investment accounts in international banks under my name, government bonds generating monthly interest, properties in high-value areas Arthur had bought discreetly over the last 20 years, shares in solid companies paying constant dividends, an irrevocable trust guaranteeing me income for life. In total, more than $2 million carefully protected and structured in such a way that no clever lawyer could touch them without my explicit authorization. Arthur had worked with asset protection specialists. He had created legal structures so solid they were practically impenetrable. And most importantly, everything was completely hidden from greedy eyes that only looked in the obvious places. "The bank has specific instructions," Arthur's letter continued. They know exactly what to do if the $100,000 account is emptied without your actual consent. They have orders to contact you immediately, to block any future attempt to access information about our other accounts, and to activate additional security protocols. I have also left instructions with our trusted lawyer, Mr. Maxwell Sterling, who is not the lawyer who read the public will. He handles our private and truly important affairs. I kept reading with a racing heart. Arthur had thought of everything. He had left documented evidence of every transfer he and I had made in Sarah's favor over the years. The $20,000 we gave her for her first car, the $35,000 for the down payment on her first house, the $15,000 when she got divorced and needed to rebuild her life, the countless gifts, the monthly help when her design business failed, the credit card payments we covered without her knowing. It is not to collect it from her, Arthur had written. It is so you remember that we always gave with love, and that those who receive with genuine love never become thieves. At the end of the binder was a smaller, sealed envelope, with the words, "Open only when you decide to act," written on the front. I held it in my hands, feeling its weight, knowing that inside that envelope was the key to what would come next. But I didn't open it yet. First, I needed to process everything I had just discovered. I sat in Arthur's chair, in that space where he had made so many important decisions. I looked around his study, observing the books he had read, the diplomas and certificates he had earned with effort, the photographs of our family in happier times. My gaze stopped on a particular photo of Sarah when she was 5 years old. She was sitting on Arthur's lap, smiling without front teeth, hugging her father with that absolute trust only small children have. At what moment had that innocent girl turned into the woman who had just robbed me? At what moment had filial love transformed into greed? Had it been gradual, or had it always existed beneath the surface, waiting for the right opportunity to emerge? I closed my eyes and let the memories flow. I remembered all the times Sarah had asked for help, and I had given it without hesitation. I remembered the nights Arthur and I argued about whether we were being too generous, whether we were creating dependence instead of fostering independence. Children are to be loved and guided, not bought, Arthur had told me in one of those conversations. But how do you deny something to your own daughter when you have the means to help her? Now I understood that Arthur had seen something I refused to see. He had noticed how Sarah only called when she needed something, how her visits always coincided with financial problems, how her expressions of affection came accompanied by requests for money. And when Patrick appeared in her life, Arthur immediately detected something dark in that man. "That guy looks at her like she's a winning lottery ticket," Arthur had told me after meeting Patrick for the first time. "And she looks at him like he's her salvation. That is not a healthy basis for a marriage, Eleanor." I had defended Sarah, arguing that after her divorce she deserved a second chance at love. But Arthur had insisted, "True love doesn't calculate. It doesn't plan. It doesn't ask how much is in the bank account before proposing marriage." Patrick had done exactly that. 2 weeks after starting to date Sarah, he was already asking casually about Arthur's business, about investments, about properties, and Sarah, hungry for male attention after her failed marriage, had interpreted that interest as fascination for her family, instead of recognizing it as the greed it truly was. I got up from the chair and walked to the study window. From there I could see the back garden, the place where Arthur and I used to sit every afternoon to drink coffee and talk about our day. The rose bush he had planted on our 20th anniversary still bloomed every spring, filling the air with its sweet scent. The wicker chairs where we sat were still there, waiting for conversations that would never happen again. But in that moment, standing in front of that window, holding the binder containing the proof of Arthur's love and foresight, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to stay paralyzed by the pain of betrayal. Arthur had left me tools, not just financial but also emotional, to face this situation with dignity and strength. I returned to the desk and carefully opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet with precise instructions and 3 phone numbers. The first was for the lawyer, Maxwell Sterling. The second was for the bank manager of our main account, a man named Daniel Bennett, with whom Arthur had worked for over 20 years. The third number was for an accounting firm specializing in asset protection. When you are ready, Arthur's final note read, "Call these people in this order." They know exactly what to do. They have been waiting for your call since the day I departed. They love you, Eleanor. They will protect you, and they will help you do what must be done." I looked at the clock. It was 4 p.m. on a Saturday. Too late to call professional offices. But on Monday morning, as soon as they opened, I would begin to execute the plan Arthur had prepared so meticulously. A plan that would not only protect my future, but also teach a painful but necessary lesson to those who had confused generosity with weakness. I stored all the documents carefully in the binder and placed it in a safe place. The rest of the weekend passed in a strange haze. I moved through the house like a ghost, preparing meals I barely touched, sleeping in fragments interrupted by nightmares, where Sarah appeared as a little girl asking me why I had abandoned her. But I hadn't abandoned her. She had abandoned me long before Arthur died. It had simply taken me all this time to realize it. On Sunday afternoon, I received 3 text messages from Sarah. The first read, "Mom, I hope you've reflected on our conversation. We are worried about you." The second, sent 2 hours later, "Patrick says he knows someone who can help you manage your finances better. We just want the best for you." The third arrived near midnight. "Your silence is childish. We are family. You should act like an adult." I didn't answer any of them. Each message was further confirmation that my daughter felt no remorse whatsoever for what she had done. In her twisted mind, she and Patrick were the saviors, and I was the stubborn old woman who didn't understand they were doing me a favor by robbing me. Monday dawned with a clear sky. I woke up early, showered carefully, and dressed in the gray pantsuit Arthur always said made me look elegant and professional. I applied light makeup and combed my graying hair back into a simple bun. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a 71-year-old woman who had lived, loved, suffered, and survived. I saw strength in my eyes, not weakness. I saw determination, not defeat. At 9 o'clock sharp in the morning, I dialed the first number Arthur had left. Lawyer Maxwell Sterling answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Vance," his warm, professional voice said, "I have been waiting for your call. I am very sorry for the circumstances leading you to contact me, but please know I am completely prepared to help you. When can we meet?" "As soon as possible," I responded firmly. "Can you come to my office this afternoon at 2? I have everything prepared. The documents Mr. Vance left, the specific instructions, everything is ready." I accepted without hesitation. Then I called the second number, that of the bank manager, Daniel Bennett. His reaction was similar, a mix of condolence and efficient professionalism. "Mrs. Vance, I have monitored your account, just as Mr. Vance instructed me. I observed the unauthorized transfer 4 days ago. I have all the documentation ready for you. You can stop by the bank tomorrow first thing." "I will be there," I confirmed. The third number, the accounting firm, gave me an appointment for Wednesday. Everything was falling into place, like pieces of a puzzle Arthur had carefully assembled before leaving. I spent the morning reviewing every document in the binder, familiarizing myself with numbers, accounts, investments. I was surprised to discover how much Arthur had accumulated without me paying too much attention. He had always handled our finances while I took care of the home and raising our children. Now I realized that perhaps that division of responsibilities had been a mistake. Maybe I should have been more involved, more informed, more prepared. But there was no point regretting the past. The present required all my attention. At 2 p.m, I arrived at Maxwell Sterling's office. The building was discreet, elegant without being ostentatious, located in a quiet area of downtown. His office was on the 5th floor, and when I entered, he received me personally. He was a man of about 60, impeccably combed gray hair, immaculate dark suit, intelligent eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Vance, it is an honor to finally meet you under these circumstances, although I would have preferred them to be different." He shook my hand with respectful firmness and guided me to his private office. The walls were covered with law books, diplomas, and certifications. On his desk was a photograph of him with Arthur, both smiling, evidently taken at some social event years ago. "Arthur was my client for over 15 years, he explained as we sat down. "But more importantly, he was my friend. He was an extraordinarily foresighted man and deeply devoted to you. Everything he did in these last few years was with your protection and well-being in mind. He opened a thick folder, similar to the one I had found in Arthur's study. Let me explain exactly what we have here. Your husband created what we call a layered asset protection structure. The first layer, the most visible one, was that $100,000 account. It was, as you now understand, a trap designed to reveal hidden intentions. And it worked perfectly. Yes, I said with bitterness I couldn't hide. Maxwell nodded with understanding. I am very sorry. I know this must be devastating. But now let's move on to the good news. The second layer consists of investment accounts established solely in your name. These accounts have multiple security protocols. No one can access them without your physical signature, notarized, in the presence of 2 previously designated witnesses. And one of those witnesses is me. How much is in those accounts? I asked directly. In total, approximately $850,000 in diversified investments. Stocks, bonds, index funds. They generate an average annual return of 6%, which means approximately $50,000 a year in earnings before taxes. My mind processed those numbers. $50,000 a year, more than $4,000 a month, more than double my current Social Security check. And that was just the second layer. The third layer, Maxwell continued, consists of real estate properties. Arthur strategically bought 4 small apartments in urban development zones over the last 10 years. Currently, all are rented. The combined monthly income is approximately $4,500. After maintenance and management expenses, you net about $3,000 monthly. $3,000 monthly. Additional. My head was spinning with these numbers that completely transformed my understanding of our financial situation. And the fourth layer, Maxwell said with a small smile, is the most interesting. Arthur established an irrevocable trust 5 years ago. He deposited the sum of $500,000 there with very specific instructions. That money is invested in low-risk instruments and generates approximately $25,000 annually. The trust has a special clause. If anyone tries to sue for it or claim it legally, it automatically dissolves and the entire capital is donated to specific charities Arthur designated. It is completely untouchable. And the rest? I asked, remembering Arthur had mentioned more than $2 million in total. Ah, yes, there is also a life insurance policy for $350,000 with you as the sole beneficiary. That has already been processed and the money is deposited in a savings account in your name. And finally, there is the house where you live, which according to the most recent appraisal is worth approximately $400,000, completely paid off. He paused, letting all that information settle in my mind. I had spent the last 2 months believing I was in a precarious financial situation, that I would depend solely on my modest pension, that maybe Sarah and Patrick were right about selling the house. But the reality was completely different. I was a financially independent woman, with monthly income that tripled my basic expenses, with assets that guaranteed me security and comfort for the rest of my life. Arthur loved you deeply, Maxwell said softly, and he knew the risks widows face in our society, especially those with children who can be influenced by unscrupulous people. What can I do now? I asked, feeling helplessness transform into power. About the money they took. The $100,000. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands on his desk. Legally, they have a certain argument. You signed papers giving them access to that account. However, there are nuances. If we can prove there was coercion, deceit, or abuse of trust, especially considering your vulnerable emotional state following your husband's death, we could present a case, but it would be long and expensive, I deduced, and emotionally draining. Family lawsuits over money are particularly nasty. Arthur foresaw this too. That's why he left specific instructions on how to proceed. Maxwell opened another section of the folder and took out a sealed document. Arthur wrote this a month before he died. These are his final instructions on how to handle this specific situation, should it occur. He slid the document toward me. You can read it here or take it home. But in summary, Arthur suggests something very specific. Do not legally pursue the stolen money. What? I couldn't hide my surprise. Why not? Because according to Arthur, and I quote verbatim, $100,000 is a small price to pay to know someone's true character. Don't waste any more time or energy chasing that money. Instead, use that clarity to protect yourself from future abuses. Let them keep that $100,000. It will be the last thing they ever get from you. Arthur's words resonated in my heart with a painful but liberating truth. He was right. Chasing that money would mean months, maybe years, of legal battles. It would mean keeping Sarah and Patrick in my life, in my thoughts, in my emotional energy. And for what? When I had more than enough to live comfortably? And what does he suggest doing instead? I asked. Maxwell smiled slightly. Total protection. First, we remove Sarah from any document where she appears as a secondary beneficiary or emergency contact. Second, we establish clear medical directives so she cannot make decisions about your health if you become incapacitated. Third, we update your will to reflect your true current wishes. And fourth, we implement a bank alert system so no one can even attempt to access information about your accounts. And my granddaughter Grace? I asked, thinking of the daughter of my late son Daniel. She has always been different. She has never asked me for anything. Arthur mentioned her specifically. He suggested that if you wish, you could include her in your will, or even establish an educational trust for her if she has children in the future. But that remains completely at your discretion. Grace is now a 30-year-old woman, independent and hardworking as I understand. I nodded. Grace was everything Sarah wasn't. She worked as a nurse, lived modestly, visited her grandmother regularly, with no hidden agenda. After her father died, I had tried to be present in her life, and she had reciprocated with genuine affection. She had never tried to take advantage of me, never mentioned money or inheritances. She simply loved me. I want to include Grace, I said firmly, and I want to make sure Sarah receives nothing more from me, neither now nor after my death. Maxwell took notes on his computer. Understood. I will prepare all the necessary documents. We will need 2 more sessions to sign everything correctly. I also strongly recommend that you consider obtaining a financial restraining order. What is that? It is a legal document that formally notifies Sarah and Patrick that any additional attempt to access, solicit, or manipulate your finances will be considered financial harassment and may result in legal consequences. It is preventive. It sends a very clear message that you are protected and legally advised. I liked the idea. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. Let's do it. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing documents, discussing options, planning strategies. When I finally left Maxwell's office, it was almost 5 in the afternoon. I felt exhausted but strangely empowered. For the first time since Arthur's death, I felt like I had control over my life. That night, sitting in my living room, I made a cup of the chamomile tea I liked so much. I sat on the sofa with a blanket over my legs and looked at the family photographs covering the walls. There were so many happy memories captured in those frames. Sarah as a child, smiling without front teeth. Daniel as a teenager, proud in his football uniform. Arthur and I on our wedding day, young and naive, with no idea of everything life would bring us. At what moment had everything changed? When exactly had Sarah begun to see me as a resource instead of as her mother? Had it been gradual or sudden? Were there signs I had ignored because I didn't want to see them? I remembered a conversation we had years ago when Sarah was going through her divorce. She had come home, crying, telling me her life was a disaster. Everyone abandons me. Mom, she had sobbed. First Dad died. No, wait. I got confused. First my husband left me. It's just that I feel like all the men in my life fail me. At that moment it had seemed like a simple emotional error. Now I realized it had been a Freudian slip. To Sarah, Arthur was already emotionally dead 3 years ago. She was just waiting for him to die physically so she could access his money. My phone vibrated. It was a text message from Sarah. Mom, it's been 2 days. Your silence is worrying. Patrick and I are going to stop by tomorrow afternoon to make sure you're okay. No, they were not going to enter my house again. They were not going to contaminate my space with their manipulative presence. I replied for the first time. Do not come. You are not welcome in my house until further notice. I am perfectly fine and perfectly capable of taking care of myself alone. The response arrived in seconds. What is wrong with you? Are you still angry about the money? We already explained it was a practical decision. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. She called me dramatic for being upset because I had been robbed. The audacity was astounding. I carefully typed my response. I am not being dramatic. I am being clear. You took $100,000 without my true consent. You deceived me into signing papers I didn't fully understand. That is called theft. No matter how you try to justify it, I need space and time. I will not contact you, and I hope you respect my decision not to be contacted. This time, the response took longer. When it arrived, the tone had changed. You are unbelievable, Mom. After everything we've done for you, after how we've taken care of you, Patrick was right about you. You are ungrateful. Don't worry. We won't bother you again. But don't come crying when you realize you are completely alone. I blocked the number. Simple, direct, liberating. If she had something important to tell me, she could do it through the lawyer, Maxwell Sterling, whose contact information I would send her formally in the coming days. Tuesday morning, I visited the bank. Daniel Bennett, the manager who had worked with Arthur for 2 decades, received me personally in his private office. He was a portly man of about 50, with a kind smile that didn't hide the seriousness of his profession. Mrs. Vance, first let me express my most sincere condolences for the loss of Mr. Vance. He was an exceptional man and an extraordinary client. He sat across from me with an open folder. As I mentioned on the phone, I have been monitoring your accounts according to the instructions Mr. Vance left. The transfer of $100,000 was executed last Thursday at 11 in the morning. Can it be traced? Can it be reversed? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Technically, it was a legal transaction. Your daughter had authorization as a cosigner. However, Mr. Vance anticipated this possibility and took measures. Let me show you. He turned his monitor so I could see. All your other accounts now have additional security protocols. I have added notes in the system indicating that any request for information about your accounts must be approved personally by you, in person, with verified identification. No family member can call pretending to be you. Is that common? I asked. It is more common than people think, especially with older clients. Financial abuse of the elderly by family members is a silent epidemic. Mr. Vance was very wise to prepare. We spent the next hour reviewing every account, every security protocol, every measure of protection. Daniel showed me detailed statements of each account, explaining how the investments worked, when I would receive dividends, how to access funds if I needed them. It was overwhelming, but also deeply reassuring. Arthur had built a system so solid that it would be practically impossible for anyone to rob me again. There is something else Mr. Vance asked me to deliver to you personally, Daniel said, opening his desk drawer. He took out a white envelope with my name, written in Arthur's handwriting. He gave it to me 3 weeks before he passed away. He made me promise I would only deliver it after you came to the bank for the first time alone, without your daughter present. I took the envelope with trembling hands. I opened it carefully and found a brief letter written on the letterhead Arthur used for important correspondence. My dear Eleanor, if you are reading this at the bank, it means Daniel confirmed the account was emptied. It means our worst fears came true. I know it hurts, my love. I know right now you feel betrayed, confused, perhaps even questioning yourself as a mother. But listen to me well. You were an exceptional mother. You gave our children love, values, education, and opportunities. What they did with all that was their choice, not your failure. I had to stop to wipe the tears clouding my vision. Daniel discreetly offered me a box of tissues and averted his gaze to give me privacy. Do not allow this theft to define or destroy you. You have enough money to live comfortably the rest of your life. More importantly, you have your dignity, your intelligence, and your capacity to love. Don't let Sarah take that from you too. Live, Eleanor. Travel to those places we always wanted to visit together. Read those books you left pending. Reconnect with old friendships. Give yourself permission to be happy without feeling guilty. And if one day Sarah returns with genuine regret, not with need disguised as love, then you will decide if you open that door. But do it from a position of strength, never weakness. I love you eternally, Arthur. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse. Thank you, Daniel, for everything, for taking care of us for so many years, for honoring my husband's last wishes. It is my privilege, Mrs. Vance. And please, if you ever need anything, any guidance, or simply someone to talk to about finances, my door is always open." He handed me his personal card with his cell number written on the back. "This is my private number. Use it without hesitation." I left the bank feeling a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for Sarah's betrayal, gratitude for Arthur's foresight, and something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could build a new and meaningful life, even at 71. That afternoon, while I was organizing papers in Arthur's study, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Grace, my granddaughter, standing on the porch with a shopping bag in her hands. I opened the door immediately. "Grace," I said. "Hi, Grandma," she said with her warm smile. "I was passing through the neighborhood after my shift at the hospital and thought I'd bring you something to eat. I know you're probably not cooking much for yourself alone." She lifted the bag. "I made your favorite vegetable soup." I invited her in, feeling my heart fill with a warmth that had been absent since Sarah and Patrick revealed their true nature. Grace moved around the kitchen with familiarity, taking out containers, serving soup into bowls, preparing tea as if it were her own home. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Arthur and I had shared thousands of meals. "How have you really been, Grandma?" Grace asked, observing me with those green eyes she had inherited from her father, my beloved son Daniel. "I haven't heard much from you lately. I called over the weekend, but you didn't answer." I hesitated for a moment. Should I tell her what Sarah had done? Grace and Sarah had never been especially close. Sarah had always seen Grace as competition for family attention, especially after Daniel died. But I didn't want to involve Grace in family drama if it wasn't necessary. "I've had some difficult days," I admitted finally. "I'm processing a lot of things about the family, about relationships, about who really cares about me." Grace put down her spoon and took my hand across the table. "Grandma, did something happen with Aunt Sarah?" My granddaughter's insight surprised me. "Why do you ask that?" "Because I know her. I know how she is. Dad used to tell me I had to be careful with her, that her love always came with conditions." Grace squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I just need you to know I'm here for you, no matter what. No agenda, no expectations, just love." And in that moment, something inside me broke. All the emotions I had been holding back for days came out in a torrent of tears. I told Grace everything, about the $100,000, about Sarah's cruel words, about Patrick and his blatant greed, about how they had wanted me to sell my house. Grace listened in silence, her expression transforming from surprise to indignation to a protective determination. "That woman is unbelievable," Grace said when I finished, her voice trembling with contained anger. "How can she do this to her own mother? Especially now, when you just lost Grandpa." She stood up suddenly and began to pace the kitchen. "Let me guess, now she's harassing you with messages, right? Playing the victim, saying you're the one acting irrationally." "Something like that," I admitted. But I blocked her number. "Good. That is exactly what you should have done." Grace returned to the table and sat opposite me. "Grandma, I'm going to tell you something you might not want to hear, but you need to hear it. Aunt Sarah isn't going to change. This isn't a mistake she made in a moment of weakness. This is who she is. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can move on with your life." She was right. Deep in my heart, I already knew it. But hearing it said aloud by someone who truly loved me gave it a validity I needed. "Dad told me things before he died," Grace continued with a soft voice, "about how Aunt Sarah was always different, how even when they were kids, she viewed everything as transactions. If she gave you a hug, it was because she wanted something. If she told you she loved you, it was because she needed a favor. Dad saw it clearly because he wasn't like that. He loved you unconditionally, and that made her behavior more obvious to him." I remembered Daniel, my eldest son. He had been a gentle, hard-working man, devoted to his family. His death in that car accident 10 years ago had been devastating. Sometimes I wondered how things would have been if he were still here. Would he have protected Arthur and me from Sarah? Would he have confronted his sister about her behavior? Grandpa Arthur knew all this, didn't he? Grace asked. That's why he left that account as a trap. He was very perceptive, more than I wanted to admit. Grace smiled sadly. Grandpa was wise, and he loved you enough to protect you even after his death. She got up and came to hug me. And I love you too, Grandma. I always will. Not because you have money or properties or inheritances, but because you are you. Because you raised me when Dad died and Mom couldn't function due to depression. Because you taught me to be strong and compassionate at the same time. Because you are the best person I know. We hugged for a long time, and I felt something I hadn't felt since before Arthur's death. True peace. The following days passed with a strange clarity. It was as if a fog I didn't know existed had lifted from my life. I woke up every morning with purpose, not just dragging myself through the hours as I had done since Arthur's death. I began to take care of myself again. I prepared nutritious meals instead of surviving on tea and crackers. I went for walks in the nearby park, feeling the sun on my face, watching people live their lives. Grace began to visit me more frequently. Not every day, because she respected my space and had her own busy life as a nurse, but enough for me to know I wasn't alone. Sometimes we just drank coffee together in comfortable silence. Other times we talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her work at the hospital, about the patients who touched her heart, about her dreams of maybe studying a specialization. Why don't you do it? I asked her one day while we shared lunch. It's expensive, Grandma. Medical specializations require full-time study, which means leaving my current job. My savings wouldn't reach to cover both tuition and my living expenses for 2 years. An idea began to form in my mind. A way to honor Arthur's memory by doing something meaningful with the money he had worked so hard to accumulate. How much would it cost? The full nurse practitioner program? Grace shrugged. Between tuition, books, materials, and living expenses, probably around $60,000 in total. But don't worry, Grandma. I'm saving little by little. Maybe in about 5 years I can do it. 5 years? By then I'd be 35. It's not too late. But why wait when I could help her now? This was the difference between Grace and Sarah. Grace never asked. She never hinted. She never made me feel like her love depended on what I could give her. And precisely because of that, I wanted to give her everything. I want to pay for it, I said simply. Grace almost choked on her coffee. What? No. Grandma, I can't accept that. It's too much. Why can't you accept it? I am your grandmother. I have the means. And more importantly, I want to do it. Your father would be proud to see you become a specialized nurse. Arthur would be too. Grace's eyes filled with tears. But Grandma, after what Aunt Sarah did, I thought that, I don't know, I thought you wouldn't want to help anyone financially for a while. There is a big difference between giving freely to someone who appreciates it and being robbed by someone who only sees your utility. I took her hands across the table. You have never asked me for anything, Grace. You have never made me feel like a walking bank. You love me for who I am. That is why I want to do this, not as an obligation or emotional blackmail, but as a gift of genuine love, Grace cried then. And so did I. But they were different tears than the ones I had shed for Sarah. These were tears of gratitude, connection, real and reciprocal love. On Wednesday, just as scheduled, I visited the specialized accountants Arthur had hired. The firm occupied a full floor in an elegant corporate building. I met with a woman named Mrs. Patterson, a senior accountant of about 45 with an impeccable reputation in asset protection. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Vance, was one of our most organized clients. Mrs. Patterson began, reviewing files on her computer. He worked with us for the last 8 years to structure his estate optimally. Now my job is to ensure you understand completely what you have and how to handle it. We passed 3 hours reviewing every detail. Mrs. Patterson explained taxes to me, how to minimize them legally, withdrawal strategies, estate planning. She spoke to me about the importance of having an updated will, designating medical and financial powers of attorney to trusted people, protecting myself against fraud, targeting the elderly. There is something else I must mention, Mrs. Patterson said toward the end of our meeting. Mr. Vance established an alert in our system. If we ever detect suspicious activity related to attempts to access information about his estate, We are automatically notified, and I have to inform you that the alert was triggered 3 days ago. My heart skipped a beat. What kind of activity? Someone contacted a law firm requesting information about the total estate of the widow Eleanor Vance. The firm, following ethical protocols, refused to provide any information without your written authorization, but they notified us of the attempt as a professional courtesy. Mrs. Patterson looked at me seriously. Do you have any idea who might be attempting this? I didn't need to guess. My daughter Sarah and her husband Patrick. I understand. Well, this is exactly why Mr. Vance established all these protections. Legally, they cannot access any information, but the fact they are trying suggests they suspect there is more money than they know. What can I do? For now, nothing. The system is working as it should, but I recommend you seriously consider the financial restraining order Attorney Sterling mentioned. It will send a clear legal message that any additional attempt will be considered harassment. I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Sarah hadn't stopped after stealing the $100,000. She was looking for more, digging deeper, trying to discover how much more she could take. Greed was insatiable. That night, sitting again in Arthur's study, I made a decision. It was time to write my own letter. Not for Sarah, because she didn't deserve or need to hear my words, but for myself, a declaration of independence, a promise of how I would live the rest of my life. I took out the stationery Arthur and I had used for important correspondence and began to write by hand, feeling the weight of every word. Today, at 71 years old, I declare my freedom. Freedom from living to please people who will never be satisfied. Freedom from feeling guilty for setting healthy boundaries. Freedom to be happy without asking permission. For decades, I measured my worth by how much I could give, how much I could sacrifice, how much I could endure. But Arthur taught me, even in his death, that true love does not demand or steal. True love gives freely and celebrates the other's happiness. I have cried for the loss of my husband. I have cried for the betrayal of my daughter. But I will cry no more for people who chose money over love. Instead, I will choose to live. I will choose joy. I will choose to surround myself only with those who love me for who I am, not for what I possess. This is my declaration. This is my beginning. I signed the letter and kept it in the desk drawer next to Arthur's letters. Someday, maybe, Grace would find it and know her grandmother had chosen dignity over despair. Thursday afternoon, while I was watering the plants in the garden, an unfamiliar car parked in front of my house. A young man in a suit got out with a portfolio. He approached the door and rang the bell. I opened with caution, keeping the security chain on. Mrs. Eleanor Vance? He asked politely. Who asks? I am the assistant to Attorney Fernando Castellanos. I represent your daughter Sarah Vance and your son-in-law Patrick Fuentes. I have a letter for you. He extended an official envelope. My heart raced, but I maintained composure. Leave it in the mailbox. Thank you. I closed the door before he could respond. Through the window, I watched him place the envelope in the mailbox and drive away. I waited until his car disappeared completely before going out to retrieve the envelope. Back in the house, I opened it with trembling hands. It was exactly what I feared. A formal letter from a lawyer demanding full access to information regarding Arthur's estate, alleging that as the only surviving child, Sarah had the right to know the full details of the inheritance. They argued the will had been vague and possibly unduly influenced while Arthur was sick. I called Maxwell Sterling immediately and read him the letter over the phone. Don't worry, Eleanor, Maxwell said with a calm voice after hearing the full letter. This type of legal intimidation is exactly what we expected. Fernando Castellanos is known for taking cases on a contingency basis. He charges a percentage of what is recovered. He probably promised Sarah and Patrick he would find hidden money. But he has no real legal basis. Can they force me to reveal information about my accounts? Absolutely not. Arthur's estate was distributed according to his will, which was executed correctly and verified by a judge. Everything left in your name is legally yours. You have no obligation whatsoever to reveal your personal finances to anyone, not even your daughter. I am going to respond to this letter formally, and I am also going to include the financial restraining order we discussed. It is already prepared. You just need to come sign it. When can I do it? Tomorrow at 10 in the morning? That way we can send the response immediately. I accepted without hesitation. That night, I barely slept, my mind spinning between indignation and sadness. Sarah had escalated her attack. She was no longer content with the $100,000 she had stolen. Now she wanted more, and she was willing to use lawyers, lies, and legal manipulation to get it. The next morning, I arrived early at Maxwell's office. He received me with a serious but determined expression. "Eleanor, before you sign these documents, I need you to understand completely what they mean. This financial restraining order formally notifies Sarah, Patrick, and their lawyer that any additional attempt to access, investigate, or claim your finances will be considered harassment and could result in legal actions against them. It also includes a sworn statement from you establishing that the transfer of the $100,000 was obtained through deceit and emotional coercion. Does that mean I can recover that money? We could try, but as we discussed, it would be costly and long. This statement serves more as an official record of what occurred. If in the future they try something else, we have documentation of their pattern of behavior. I have also prepared a response to Attorney Castellanos. That is, let's say, very direct." He showed me the letter. It was professional but forceful. It basically informed them they had no legal right to the information they requested, that Mrs. Eleanor Vance was completely within her rights to keep her personal finances private, and that any additional harassment would result in a countersuit for emotional distress and abuse of legal process. The tone was firm without being aggressive. Exactly what was needed. "It's perfect," I said. I signed all the necessary documents. Maxwell certified them and prepared everything for immediate dispatch via certified legal courier. They should receive this tomorrow morning. My prediction is that Attorney Castellanos will withdraw from the case as soon as he sees there is no easy money here, and Sarah and Patrick will have to accept they are not going to get anything else from you. And if they don't accept, if they continue harassing me, then we will take more severe measures. But honestly, I think this will be enough. Financial bullies generally back down when they encounter real resistance. I left the office feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. All this process, from the initial theft to this legal response, had drained emotional energy I didn't know I had left. But there was also something empowering about taking active control of the situation instead of being a passive victim. I passed the weekend in a state of nervous anticipation, waiting for some explosive reaction from Sarah. But the silence was absolute. No messages, no calls, no unexpected visits. It was as if she had disappeared from my life completely. Part of me felt relieved. Another part, the part that was still a mother despite everything, felt a deep pain for the definitive loss of that relationship. Monday afternoon, Grace came to visit me. She brought news. "Grandma, I need to tell you something." Aunt Sarah called me. My whole body tensed. What did she want? She tried to use the family card. Grace made air quotes when saying family. "She told me you are acting irrationally, that you have become paranoid, that a manipulative lawyer is filling your head with crazy ideas. She asked me to come talk to you, to convince you to be reasonable about Grandpa's inheritance." "And what did you tell her?" Grace smiled with a satisfaction that reminded me of her father. "I told her I already know exactly what she and Patrick did, that I know about the $100,000 they stole, and that if she calls me again trying to use me as a messenger in her manipulative games, I will block her number just like you did." I laughed for the first time in days, a genuine laugh that came from deep in my chest. "Did you really tell her that?" "Word for word. Dad always taught me to defend the people I love. And I love you, Grandma. I am always going to be on your side." She sat next to me on the sofa and rested her head on my shoulder. "You know what's saddest? That she actually believes she is right. She believes she deserves that money simply for being your daughter. As if filial love were a commercial transaction where children invest minimum time and expect maximum returns." Her words captured perfectly what I had been feeling, but hadn't been able to articulate. Sarah viewed the mother-daughter relationship as a financial contract, not a bond of love. And when that contract didn't yield what she considered fair, she simply decided to take what she believed belonged to her. "I've been thinking a lot about this," Grace continued, "about why she is like that and Dad wasn't. They both had the same parents, the same upbringing, the same opportunities. But Dad came out with empathy and compassion, while she came out with, well, with whatever drives her now. Your father had Arthur's heart, I said softly. Sarah has something different. I don't know if she was born like that or if something in her life changed her, but it is no longer my responsibility to discover it or fix it. Grace raised her head and looked directly at me. I am proud of you, Grandma. I know this is incredibly difficult, but you are choosing your well-being over guilt. That requires a lot of strength. The following weeks passed with unexpected tranquility. There were no more lawyer letters. There were no more contact attempts from Sarah. It was as if she had decided that if she couldn't get my money, then she had no use for me. That realization should have hurt more than it did, but by that moment, I had already begun the process of acceptance and healing. I began to do things just for me, small things at first. I signed up for a book club at the local library. I visited museums I had always wanted to see but never made time for. I took watercolor painting classes at the community center, discovering a latent talent I had never explored. I also began to reconnect with old friendships I had neglected during the last few years. While caring for Arthur, Teresa, my friend since high school, came for tea. We talked for hours, catching up on our lives. I told her about Sarah, about the theft, about everything. She listened without judgment. You know, Eleanor, Teresa said thoughtfully, sometimes children teach us lessons we never expected to learn. They aren't always pleasant lessons, but they are necessary. Sarah taught you that your value doesn't depend on how much you can give. That true love is not bought or negotiated. She was right. Painfully, brutally, but she was right. A month after the incident with Sarah's lawyer, I received an unexpected call from Maxwell Sterling. Eleanor, I have news. Attorney Castellanos officially withdrew from Sarah's case. In his withdrawal letter, he mentions irreconcilable differences with the clients regarding realistic expectations. That is lawyer speak for, I discovered there is no easy money here and they aren't paying my fees, period. I laughed despite the situation. So I suppose Patrick discovered the $100,000 wouldn't multiply magically. Exactly. We also received confirmation they will not file any lawsuit. Basically, they gave up. It was a victory, but a hollow one. 3 months after Sarah stole the $100,000, I found myself sitting in a small cafe in Rome. Yes, Rome. The city Arthur and I had always dreamed of visiting together, but always postponed for one reason or another. First it was work, then the kids, then the grandkids, and finally, his illness. But now, sitting in front of a perfect cup of espresso, looking at the Colosseum in the distance, I realized maybe this was the right time after all. I had used part of the money Arthur left me to make this trip, a full month in Italy, visiting Rome, Florence, Venice, traveling alone, but without feeling lonely. Every day, I discovered something new. Not just about these historic places, but about myself. I discovered I enjoyed the freedom of eating when I wanted, sleeping when I was tired, changing plans without consulting anyone. I discovered that at 71, I could still surprise myself. Grace sent me messages almost every day, photographs of her life, updates on her progress with the admission paperwork for the specialization I had decided to finance. Her gratitude never felt exaggerated or fake. It was simple and genuine, like everything about her. Love you, Grandma. Thank you for believing in me, one of her messages read. And I believed her because her actions had always backed her words. From Sarah, I had heard nothing. Absolute silence. Part of me, that maternal part that never dies completely no matter how much you are hurt, wondered how she was, if the money she had stolen had brought her the happiness she expected, if Patrick was still by her side, or if he had disappeared now that the $100,000 were likely spent. But they were passing thoughts, like clouds crossing the sky, without leaving a permanent mark. One afternoon, while walking through the cobblestone streets of Trastevere, my phone rang. It was an unknown number with an international code. I hesitated before answering, but something urged me to do it. Mom. Sarah's voice sounded small, almost fragile. So different from the triumphant and mocking voice she had used that terrible day in my living room. My heart raced, but I kept my voice neutral. Sarah, I needed to call you. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but... She paused for a long time. I could hear traffic in the background, distant voices. Patrick left. He took what was left of the money and left me. Turns out he had gambling debts I didn't know about. Everything disappeared in less than 2 months. I felt no satisfaction hearing this. I felt no fulfilled vengeance. I only felt a deep sadness for how predictable it all had been. And you are calling me why? Because you were right. Her voice cracked. About him. About everything. And I was so stupid, so blind, so... She began to cry. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I robbed you. I'm sorry I treated you like that. I'm sorry I chose that man over you. Part of me wanted to console her, tell her everything would be fine, that I forgave her and we could rebuild our relationship. That was the maternal part, programmed by decades of putting my children's needs before my own. But there was another part, the part Arthur had helped strengthen even after his death, that knew I had to be careful. Sarah, are you calling me because you truly feel remorse, or because Patrick left and you need something? The silence that followed was revealing. Both, I suppose. Yes, I am in a difficult situation. I lost my apartment because I couldn't pay the rent. I'm living with a friend temporarily. But also, these months have given me a lot of time to think. To see how I treated Dad when he was sick. How I treated you. What kind of person had I become? And what kind of person were you? A horrible person. Selfish, greedy. Someone Dad wouldn't have recognized. She cried harder. I miss him. Mom, I miss when we were a real family. When I wasn't. In this. I sat on a nearby bench, watching tourists pass, couples holding hands, families laughing together. Sarah, I can't go back in time and pretend none of this happened. You robbed me. Not just money, but trust, security, the image I had of you as my daughter. That isn't fixed with a phone call and an apology. I know. God, I know. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I just needed you to know I'm sorry, that I finally understand what I lost. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about you. About our relationship. About the opportunity to be the daughter you deserved. Her words sounded sincere. But Arthur had taught me that words are easy. It is consistent actions over time that reveal the truth. If you have truly changed, Sarah, I am glad. Truly. But that change has to be for you, not for me. You have to rebuild your life, your character, your integrity by yourself. Not because you expect me to rescue you financially. I'm not asking you for money, she said quickly. Maybe too quickly. Good. Because I won't give you any. The $100,000 you took is the last thing you will receive from me. If you have truly learned something from this experience, you will learn to stand up on your own. So is this it? I'm no longer your daughter? The question pierced my heart like a knife. You will always be my daughter biologically. Nothing can change that. But the kind of relationship we have in the future, if we have any, will depend completely on your actions, not your words, your actions. If in a year, 2 years, 5 years, you have shown with your life that you truly changed, that you became someone with integrity and compassion, then maybe we can talk about rebuilding something. But for now, I need to protect myself. And that means keeping you at a distance. I heard her ragged breathing on the other end of the line. Where are you? You sound like you're outside. I am in Italy. In Rome. Alone? Alone. And it's okay. Better than okay, actually. I am learning to be happy by myself. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Sarah, I spent too many years of my life measuring my worth by how much I could give to others, how much I could sacrifice myself, how much I could endure. But your father taught me, even after dying, that my life also has value, that I deserve peace, joy, dignity, and that is what I am choosing now. I love you, Mom. Her voice was barely a whisper. I loved you too, your whole life. But love is not enough when there is no respect or trust. Maybe someday we can rebuild that, but today is not that day. I took a deep breath. Take care of yourself, Sarah. I truly hope you find your way, but that way cannot depend on me. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were trembling. Tears ran down my cheeks. But they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of liberation. I had said what I needed to say. I had set the boundaries I needed to set. And now I could continue living my life without the burden of guilt I had been carrying. That night, back in my small boutique hotel, I wrote in the journal I had started keeping since arriving in Italy. Today I spoke with Sarah. Part of me wanted to rescue her like I always have, but I chose to rescue myself instead. I chose my peace over her comfort. And although it hurts, I know it is the right thing. Arthur would be proud. The remaining days of my trip passed in a melancholic beauty. I visited the Sistine Chapel and wept in front of the creation of Adam. I walked through the gardens of Villa Borghese and felt Arthur's presence by my side. I ate homemade pasta in small trattorias where the owners treated me like family. And slowly, day by day, I felt the cracks in my heart begin to heal. When I finally returned home, Grace met me at the airport with a bouquet of roses, the same ones Arthur used to give me. "Welcome home, Grandma. I missed you so much." We hugged amidst the airport bustle, and I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. The following months were of quiet reconstruction. I continued with my painting classes. I joined a volunteer group at a women's shelter, helping others who had experienced family financial abuse. My paintings improved. My social circle grew. My life filled with purpose that didn't depend on being useful to people who didn't value me. Grace started her specialization program. I visited her regularly, bringing her homemade food, listening to her stories about patients and studies. Seeing her bloom, knowing I had helped make that possible, filled me with a satisfaction no money could buy. From Sarah, I heard nothing more. No more calls, no messages. It was as if she had finally accepted there would be no more financial rescues. And although a small part of me still wondered how she was, the greater part had made peace with the distance. Today, almost a year after that terrible day in my living room, I sit in the same spot where Sarah announced her betrayal. But the room feels different now, lighter, filled with photographs of my travels, paintings I have created, memories of happy moments with Grace and true friends. In my hand, I hold a cup of tea, and in my heart, I hold peace. I don't need anyone's permission to live my life fully. I don't need validation from people who only valued me for my utility. I don't need to carry guilt for setting healthy boundaries. I am Eleanor Vance, 72 years old, widow, mother, grandmother, amateur artist, traveler, survivor, and for the first time in a long time, I am genuinely happy. The true fortune Arthur left me wasn't the $2 million. It was the lesson that my dignity is worth more than any toxic relationship. That self-love is not selfishness. That it is okay to let go of people who hurt you, even if they share your blood. That is the most valuable inheritance I could have received. And as I wrote to Arthur in a letter I left by his grave last week, thank you, my love, for protecting me even after leaving. Thank you for teaching me that I deserve peace. I am living the life we dreamed of together. Only now I live it for both of us. I love you eternally.